Yes. Well, I'll welcome everybody who's on site at the moment. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Before we start, facts that you might need to know. In view of the fact that we may have a larger audience or a large audience today, we've muted the participants as you join the show, and I would ask you to stay muted to ensure that we don't have background noise. We're also recording the session, which means that anybody who picks up images and questions asked will be included in the recording. Can I make sure, first of all, that you're on speaker view? So if you go to the top right-hand corner of the screen, you'll be able to click on the little icon at the top there, and it will switch you over to speaker view. There should be 3 little squares above it.
Yep.
Hopefully you now have me as the largest picture on your screen. If you cannot get the speaker view, then I will be the person with a coloured square around my image because I'm the person who is speaking. To ask a question, move your cursor down to the bottom to chat, which is on the bottom line. If you click on this, it will give you a side panel, and at the bottom of the side panel, you can type in your question. So we will then know what your questions are, and I'll just go on to chat myself, and there's no questions there at the moment, but if you feel you want to ask a question, that's the place you go to ask the question. And we'll pick up on those questions and we'll put them to the presenters. And I would like to introduce the presenters because they're all here with us now from Love Lane. We've got John Birch. Smiles and put his hand up. Tim Humphries is with us. Bob Godden, sorry, Bob. Jonathan Bushell, Colin Dowling, and Rob. And he's not here at the moment. He will be joining us, I hope. And Robin. Are you there, Robin?
Yeah, I'm here.
Right, welcome. So those are the presenters, and they're all going to answer different questions on different aspects as the questions come in. And I'm sure they'll keep us amused with all the information they've got for us. So if you have any questions now and you've come onto the session, please do go to chat and please post your questions. I hope you've enjoyed the video.
Richard, you missed one presenter.
Oh, right, sorry.
Which is Rod Turner, or Roderick on my screen, who's the guy who did most of the filming and the editing of the video.
All right, sorry about that, Rod.
And chose all the music and basically made it a bit of a mission. According to his wife, quite a lot of a mission. Is the Glenn Scott I can see here the one in Sydney?
He can't talk because he's muted, John. Remember?
No. Didn't react.
We've got 22 participants at the moment. And at the moment, I've had no questions asked me on chat. Here we go. The first question. What type of sound decoder do you use on your steam locomotives? It's the first question. And that comes from Steve Hother.
Robin, I think you can go first. And no, Bob, probably. You've been playing around with them most lately.
Okay, yeah. It's the Zimmo 345R. It seems to be the most flexible. It's also able to be tuned quite a bit to motors because it's not just the sound, it's also the performance within the locomotive and the ability to tune it to the motors you're using. So that's the one I centered on, having used another type previously. The most important bit as well is mating it with a good speaker. I think we're mostly using the double-ended ones to give a bit more of an effect. I'm not a technician, so I don't know how it works, but certainly the double-ended ones seem to work pretty well.
How about Robin? Because you've played around with them as well, particularly with the smoke unit.
Yes, well, I would go for the Zimmo 645R myself, which seems to work on just about everything. They've got an enormous range of adjustments that you can make to them. For the steam output projects. They're much easier to use than ESU, and they've also got an adapter board which we've started to use now on high current applications, which can also put out a 5-volt regulated supply, which is jolly useful for some things. So yeah, I'm a fan of those. But for sound files, I think we've got them from all over the place. My original ones came from Coastal DCC, who's a very helpful guy, Kevin. John Geimer of UTunes has provided most of the ones that we're using with the Steam projects, and he's been extremely helpful, and he's the guy that helped Steve Baldock with his work. So other providers are available. In terms of speakers, I haven't fitted many in my own locos because I haven't got many locos. I just keep fixing bits of wire for other people. But the as was said earlier by Bob, the one that we've been using lately, I don't know whether this is going to work, but here's one I prepared earlier. Whoops, that one is fairly compact and it gives good sound.
Yeah.
So we're quite impressed with that one. That's about it from me.
And there's one more aspect, I think, and that's where you put the speaker. I had to retrofit stuff into engines, therefore didn't have a choice from square one as to where to design in the DCC sound, etc. But if they can be put in the boiler, it's quite a bit better. I think in the tender you get more resonance. It just doesn't sound right. And when you're fairly close to the locomotive, you can tell that the sound's actually emanating from the tender. So where you put the speaker has an effect as well, I think.
Yeah.
I think it might also be worth mentioning that you guys like to use stay alives, and I've used them a couple of times, which makes a great deal of, well, gives a huge improvement, I think, in running if there are any little dead spots or whatever. It's particularly frustrating if there is a very quick dead spot and sound goes out and you have to reset it. Stay alive seem to stop that altogether.
Very good. I've had no more questions at the moment, so if there are now 32 of us in this group.
They're all very quiet.
And you've just joined us, go down to chat and post your questions in chat. You'll come up with a box on the right-hand side of your screen, and it allows you at the bottom of there to type in your question, and then we'll pick it up and put it to the panel.
A question that I would pose to our own team, if I may, is if we run through what we believe we've learnt from this layout, what we would do again and what we wouldn't do again, because I think it's been a huge learning experience for all of us. Does anyone, well, do you want to kick off on that one, John, because you've been involved right from the beginning with it?
Yeah, okay. I think one thing to put across is that for some of us, it's the first layout we've ever built. And if it's not the first one, it's the first one that looks somewhere near complete. And what have we learned? Well, don't start with somebody else's layout, which this was. This was actually inherited from somebody who started it in a care home. And it was about to go in a skip when the original owner died. It was no more than track on boards at that stage, and unfortunately the boards were MDF, and I will never go near an MDF baseboard again. They're heavy, they sag, and they're generally pretty bad news, but I suspect everybody else already knows that. Apart from that, no, I think the one thing I would do, and I know this is Tim's philosophy, is if something isn't working out, don't try and just fiddle with it. Just rip it up, throw it away, do it again. Particularly track work. As you know, Love Lane is scale 7. It's no harder to build scale 7 track work than fine scale track work. contrary to some people's thoughts. But you do have to go steadily and make sure that you test it and make sure it works. That's my comment.
To reiterate that point about not trying to bodge things, I think Bob and I could probably tell a few good stories, and I think Jonathan was involved in building curved crossovers to a reasonably tight radius, and we put one, and I probably did a lot of it to begin with, and it didn't work terribly well, and we spent a lot of time bodging it, and I think it was Bob in the end said, "Oh, sod it, let's start again." And that actually was far quicker than keep messing around trying to fix something all the time. I think that was a big learning lesson.
Yeah.
Which you just pointed out. Whatever we're doing, if it ain't right, do it again.
Tim,
I think the other thing is that we built the fiddle yard using soldered track on copper clad, and it was no quicker than the way we built the main line, which was wooden sleepers, exacta scale chairs. If anything, quicker and much easier to fettle if it's not working. We've got 2 more questions now.
we have indeed, yes. 2 questions are, tell us about the homemade smoke system on the 8F.
That's definitely Robin.
Yes, I can do that. Do you want to try handing the host to me, and then I can share that one I prepared earlier? Because we guessed somebody might ask that.
I can do that for you. Robin, I'll make you the host. There you go.
Right. This should allow me, because I did practice this last night, but whether it will work today, of course, is another matter, to show you a little presentation that I prepared earlier, because we expected somebody might ask that question. It was built by Steve Baldock, who sadly is no longer with us. And if I can get it to work, because I've lost the bit that says run it. Why is that?
F5, Robin.
F5, thank you very much. Oh, it worked perfectly when I tried it earlier. Let me try it. Are you actually seeing it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Good. Why can't I see run it? How's that? No, still not working. How annoying. Well, can you see some of it?
That looks promising.
Right. Okay, I've no idea why it's not working now. It was working fine before. And so Steve built it himself, and he also built another 4 at least locos using the same system. What's inside it is this lot. This is the chassis of the 8F. This piece of wire here is nothing to do with the steam. This servo goes in this space here. And if you look closely enough, when you move from forward to reverse, the reversing gear actually moves in the valve gear. Up here, we've got 2 fans. This one was really for the steam cylinder cocks, but it actually isn't terribly effective on the 8F. He did get it to work on the later ones. This one is for the safety valve steam. And then popping up here, because it's not part of the chassis, it's in the body, this tank with a motor driving a fan inside it and some heaters is for the chimney. These are the components on their own, and there's that speaker I was showing earlier. So all these parts Steve made, he was a very clever engineer, out of PTFE. It's got up here the decoder that we were talking about earlier, which is a Zimo MX645, and it's mounted on their ADAPT board, which produces a 5-volt supply for everything else, which they introduced fairly well a couple of years ago, and it's made it a lot easier. Then there's all this nest of wiring, which looks a bit of a muddle, but it's not quite so bad once you get it fitted on there. And then the critical bit, really, the thing that Steve developed, is this board with some optical relays on. The bit that you can see here are actually miniature fuses, but on the other side, there's some optically isolated AC relays. And so what happens, you tell the decoder, and there's a set of codes for it, to turn on the chimney steam, and that sends a signal to the relay board, which then turns on the heaters, which are in here, just coils. They're MTH, American steam heating coils. That heats up a fluid which creates a vapor, and then this fan starts to turn and blows the vapor up the chimney. And the Zimmo board has the ability to pulse the fan in time with the sound, and that's what provides the chuffing. And Steve did a lot of experimenting with it. He had a lot of trouble with the decoders blowing up. He tried a different sort of decoder, still had the same problem. And then Zimmo suggested this board, and after that, he didn't have a problem with the decoders blowing up, thank heavens. You press another button, and on his original version, you had to turn the heater on first. And then 6 seconds later, you could turn the fan on, and that would blow the smoke or the steam through the safety valve. And it was the same with the cylinder units. Later, John Geimer changed the sound system for him. So when you pressed safety valve sound on your hand controller, it didn't actually come on straight away. It counted to 6 before the sound came on. So the heater has time to heat up. So if you want to blow the safety valve, you have to do it 6 seconds before you actually want to see it. This is the chimney unit, and actually the reason I put this on here, and the person that I thought might be on the call was Len Catley, who's building a 9F, and he wants to incorporate this system in it, is because the minimum diameter to fit this particular unit in the boiler is 30 millimeters. And I know that's a bit of a challenge on the 9F. You can do it because Steve has already started to do it, but it needs a space 30 millimeters in diameter to fit this in. You don't need to worry about the fan sticking out the top. That's just sticking out the top because I've bunged it on there and it needs trimming off. But that is quite important that it's 30 millimeters in diameter. The circuit board that Steve designed, he did this on SolidWorks, and I have this design, which isn't quite the same as the one in the 8F. If anybody does ever want to make another one, I've been working for several months on a cheapo woodpecker mill that I'm hoping is going to machine this out for me. So far, I have to say I haven't managed, but one day perhaps. But Steve didn't actually ever make a board like this, I think. All the ones that he made, he carved out by hand from strip board. The wiring diagram, he didn't actually have a wiring diagram, so I drew this one up after several failed attempts. I think I got it right. So if anybody wants to build one, this wiring diagram is available to them. And just to show you, this is part of the Love Lane video that's on the Guild website, just to show what I mean. If the locos come to a halt in front of the signal, I wanted to blow the safety valve, so I had to press the button 6 seconds before it went off. And unfortunately, when we took the video, I hadn't let it warm up enough. It should have had a circuit round because not much steam came out of the safety valve at that point. And off it goes, producing loads and loads of steam. I've had a lot of fun with it myself, but it's the only one we've got. I've got parts to make some more, but the other locos that Steve built, his family kept them, and they just sit on the mantelpiece or in the display cabinets, I think, which is a bit of a shame because I think he'd like to have seen them running. So there you go. If I can hand it back to you.
Thank you, Robin.
Where have you gone, Richard?
You got me?
Yeah. Did that work?
I think so. I've got some more questions, if you can all hear me. There's a question about, do you spring and compensate all wheels on scale 7?
Yes, apart from freight bogies in my case. And what I've done there, Ian, is make the bogie so the two sides can slightly wobble. So effectively they compensate. But the carriages, I note, actually that was a Steve Ho question, beg your pardon. Yeah, I think almost everything is sprung in some way, sprung rather than compensated. The Quintart, I'll come back to the lack of passengers in a minute. The Quintart, it rides on Jonathan Bushell's patent sprung bogie frames, which are absolute bliss. They go together in no time and they ride superbly. He's sitting there looking very smug. Do you want to say anything about them, Jonathan?
I was just going to say I haven't patented them yet.
But etches are available.
They are available, yes, if anyone wants some.
No, they're really well. Who wants to answer about the lack of passengers in the Quint?
Well, I think the answer was guessed, wasn't it? It's about to be shut down because of lack of use.
Yeah, a number of trains that go rushing through on the video is a vain attempt to prove it should remain open.
Yeah. I would add on the suspension that just the components we've used, apart from Jonathan's on carriages, which have proved to be the best by far, I'm experimenting with one of the Suburbans that have recently come out from, who is it? Darstead, and they're compensated. Yeah, they're compensated and fitting in a set of pear tree wheels looks to be dead easy. So they seem to give a nice ride. On wagons, we've used a mixture of Slater's sprung components and the exacta scale Bill Bedford steel spring wire versions, and they all seem to work pretty well. Horses for courses. We have got some wagons or a few without compensation or springing, which work, but they just don't ride as nicely, in my opinion. And I think that's, again, probably what we all believe.
I think it's worth my mentioning that what converted me to scale 7, persuaded me to switch to scale 7, was watching a freight train run through a whole set of points on Peter Hunt's West Mersey. And there was none of that effect of the wagons as they went through the point. They just glided through. And one of the more annoying aspects of a lot of models is the sort of rattling through the points for me.
Another question's come up as what fluid did you use in the smoke unit?
Well, the one that we found is the best is, or well, for some reasons, is the ESU oil, which is that one. Unfortunately, at the moment, it seems to be in very short supply. So this one, the Sooth Oil, this is the mega-sized bottle of it, is okay, but is smellier. This one, I was terribly excited when this one came out, the steam smelling one, because we all thought we've got the sound, we've got the sight of the steam, all we need now is the smell of a proper loco burning real Welsh steam coal. Unfortunately, it smells more like carbolic soap, and really strong carbolic soap, and that's why it's in the polythene bag, because I don't want to throw it out, but it does stink the house out, to be honest. So
it's worth pointing out that the room that Love Lane lives in is quite sizable. And when we were filming the 8F, which was all done on one day, and Cecil B. de Turner was insisting on take after take as the train ran through, and by the end you couldn't quite see across the room from the smoke vapor. So, but Robin's developing something that makes cold steam from water. Do you want to mention that, Robin?
well, I can mention it. I can't show it to you, unfortunately. I had hoped to have it running today in case anybody mentioned it, but I'm afraid I've been terribly bad and not finished it. But yeah, it's an ultrasound system that's been developed by somebody else, David Viewing, which he's put in his Gauge 1 locos. And there's another guy who's been working with John Guymer, who's developing a similar system. I've adapted it to use the same decoder and adapter board that Steve's system uses, and it doesn't smell at all. The problem with it is it doesn't create so much steam. So I think I quite like it. I like it better than no steam, but I've been working, and so has Rod, on trying to make it a bit more productive. And we haven't got very far, to be honest with that. But it definitely works. And if anybody's interested another day, I can show it to them, but I'm afraid it's all in bits at the moment.
Right. We have got now 40 participants now joining us on this session. If any of you have any questions, go to the bottom of your screen, press on chat, and that will allow you to type in your question so we can see it, and we make sure it can get answered for you.
Could I just add one more thing about springing, if that's okay?
Yes, of course.
It was just regarding on our layout, and also on another of our the layouts in our area as well. There are a lot of Helgen diesels and Dapol diesels as well, and they, Colin Dowling will be able to tell you a bit more about that. But with those, it's just the wheels are reprofiled. There's no springing on those. I think partly because the models are so heavy that they do just keep pushing the wheels down onto the track, and so diesels are very easy to convert to scale 7. It's literally take the wheels off, reprofile, pop them back on at the right back to back, and then they're good to go straight away. I say Colin might be able to add a bit more on how that's done, as he's the master reprofiler.
I can't really add much more to that at all. You're right in what you say, Jonathan. The Helgen logos they're so heavy, and to be honest, to try and spring one of those would be a major operation, I think, anyway, as well. But it's not really necessary on those. But kit built stuff, I think in scale 7, you definitely need to spring axle boxes, all axle boxes, especially on steam locomotives with pony trucks and bogies. It does improve the running and make it, how can I say, with a finer scale or finer flange and tighter tolerances on the gauge, you need the springing in scale 7, especially on steam locomotives. But the ready to run stuff seems to manage quite well as it is. Although some of the other ready to run, not necessarily the diesels, but the little 060 steam locos and things like that, they do have a little bit of up and down free play tend to on the centre axle sometimes, with a small spring. I'm thinking of the Ginty and the some of the Great Western locos that Dapol and Minerva have brought out. And I've tend to found that the amount of play in the centre axle is certainly enough for scale 7 once they're converted. I don't think there's much else I can add to that really for ready to runs. Wagon stock and that sort of thing, perhaps, yes, that could do with it. And a bit more weight as well in wagons.
Thank you, Colin. Right, that's informative.
Going back, if I may, to John was talking about, he got his buy-in was all around the smooth running, and I think that probably applies to us all. And that is, as we say, down to really closing up the tolerances to as near scale as possible in the track building. Everyone doesn't want to convert to scale 7, and I'm probably going to get shot by the scale 7 committee for talking about it. But there's those with lots of fine scale locos. And I'd say to people, have a look at changing your point work, closing the gaps up to 31.5 mil tolerances. And I think you have to change the back to back. But I think you can improve your standard of running really significantly by that change. We've got a few people in scale 7 now who are 31.5 mil, 32 mil modelers, but they like our principles that we've adopted in scale 7. But I've got 35 locos, 40 coaches and 300 wagons. What am I going to do? And I think, and much as it might be heretical to say, I think the 31.5 mil may be the way to go for a lot of people. And then you can also use scale 7 wheels with those track standards, which makes the locos, wagons, coaches, to me, look even better.
Tim, that raises a question for me, because I run at 32 mil and fine scale. I have to build a crossover on the curve. And
Yes.
Another thing that I've been told to do is I can close the gaps down to 31.5 and still run through. And the other thing that has been suggested to me is that I raise the check rail by 1 millimeter, and that guides it better into the frog gap. Don't know whether that works or not, but it'd be most interesting to see if I can get it to work.
Yeah.
Because
I don't know what the others would say in our group, but I personally can't see what that would achieve at all. It really is that, isn't it, the space between the crossing V and the face of the check rail? I can't remember what that measurement's called. That's the crucial one for guiding it. Making it any higher, no, I don't get. Anyone else, any ideas?
I don't think it would work. A check rail would work on the flange. If it's higher than the running rail height, I can't see it making any difference at all.
No.
More likelihood of jamming the wheel, but no, I can't see the gain there at all.
Right.
They did use them on the real railway, a higher flange rail, which is why the 9F can no longer run on the main line.
Right.
So they did use me. It might give it a bit more bite, perhaps, but it's not something that we use in scale 7. Certainly not in Love Lane anyway. So
one of the things that doesn't scale down is weight and the mass, and the real thing relies quite a bit on that. And if you've not got that effect, I think something like raising the check rail wouldn't necessarily be guaranteed to work.
Do any improvement? No. But
I think
31.5 might do. I would do.
Yeah, I think a 31.5 is a really good solution if you've got a lot of stock. And of course the scale 7 group, of which Mr. Humphreys is the vice chairman, by the way, will very happily sell you 31.5 mil track gauges now.
Providing you become a member of the scale 7 group, that's a requirement for my financial and tax purposes. It's not marketing ploy, but we want more and more members, so sign up, please.
I've had Steve Howell has put another question up. Some cast iron wheels will not work with 31.5 millimeters. I also raise check rails. Raised check rails are useful on shallow diamonds, particularly with pony trucks, apparently. Thank you, Steve, for that.
Richard, could you get Steve to be able to speak and tell us what his experiences of that are? Because I think that would be very interesting for us all to hear.
Yeah, Steve, would you like to unmute yourself in the bottom left-hand corner? There you go.
I think I've unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I thought I'd just add my experience and also on the technical committee. When we published the 31.5, the new track standards, I actually built some slidings to 31.5, and the key dimension for going through points is not the traditional back-to-back, which we always used to talk about, but is check gauge, which is back-to-back plus 1 flange thickness. And obviously that on the wheel must be equal to or less than the track check gauge. We found that some cast iron wheels from 2 different makes, they basically had back-to-back the same as Slater's 29.2, but the flanges were a little bit thicker not surprising, because they have to be turned down, and they hit the point of the V. So in fact, I had to convert sidings I built back to 32. On the raised check rails, someone mentioned 9Fs. It was also a problem with class 40s with pony trucks. If you think of a shallow diamond, you've got gaps in both rails opposite each other. And so a pony truck is unguided. And it can easily, I say easily, it does sometimes go the wrong way. A raised check rail will, how can I describe this, grab the back of the incoming wheel slightly before a normal height check rail.
Right.
Just makes that slightest little bit of extra, stops the pony truck going the wrong way where the gaps are opposite each other. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah, completely.
Very interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What
That
sort of
makes complete
height,
sense.
Steve, would you raise it?
I think I'm going to measure it. I think mine's about 1 millimeter.
I was going to say about more.
Interestingly, though, I have found that when someone bought a Deltic from Lloyd Lovelace, his traction motors, I think it's the second version of his model, his traction motors are too low down my race check rail. So although I put a ramp at the beginning and end, the bogie nicely goes up and down, and if you're lucky, it lands back on the rails. So you do have to be consistent on your underfloor clearance against the height of your raised check rail. I think it's about 1 mil. If you keep talking amongst yourselves, I can find a ruler.
Yeah, I think the problem with the Lovelace Deltic, it's got traction motors on each axle, isn't it? With a gear behind the wheel, isn't it?
Yes, they're very low down. That was the problem.
Yeah.
I'll just go measure one. I'll come back to the answer.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
I've had no more questions yet from anybody, and we still have 33 participants.
Richard,
Another question, please.
Richard Ian's got his hand up if he'd like to ask a question.
Ian?
Right. Not so much a question, but I'd like to make a suggestion about this back-to-back that's being bandied about. In Scale 7, because we always use the same wheel profile, back-to-back is what you need, because all our wheels are the same. In O gauge, or standard gauge, whatever you call it, everybody seems to use a different wheel profile. With different thicknesses of flanges and different depth of flange, etc. A bit of a mess, really. There's no standardization, which is something we just don't have in Scale 7. It's not a problem. And every time I see it being mentioned about not using back-to-back, I think, well, you need to get yourself sorted out and get your proper flange, your proper wheel profile first, and then you don't have any problems with running. Enough said.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, with regard to back-to-back, it's the as was mentioned earlier on, it's the back of the flange in contact with the check rail that keeps the opposite side wheel away from the point of the crossing V. So the back-to-back is very important, as Ian was saying. So it needs to be right, otherwise it just doesn't work.
Yeah, you need just the one track and wheel standard. For whether it's fine scale or scale 7, you have to have just the one standard for all vehicles. You can't mix standards. The fine scale flanges. I don't understand why some cars. The gentleman that was on before, sorry, I didn't catch his name, mentioned that some of the cast wheels had different profiles. But I'd have thought if it's a fine scale, surely there's only one fine scale flange dimension, is there?
No, unfortunately not.
There's not. I know there's a difference between coarse scale and fine scale, but
yeah, no, I think one of the problems is that if I'm not mistaken, the Chinese factories doing some of the ready to run also are churning out stuff for the Americans. And I think the NMRA standard is a bit different again.
right.
Steve Herther probably would know the answer to this, but wasn't that part of the problem with the original Helgen Hymek, Steve?
I think so. I've not got one, so I don't know.
Yeah.
The problem basically, the history, I think, is the Guild set fine scale standards, but Slater's wheels are actually slightly wider back to back. I think to cater for the American market. I'm not sure on that. But as you say, the problem with these cast iron wheels, they are not quite to the Guild standard. The flange is slightly thicker, which means that the back of the flange rubbing on the check rail can allow the tip of the flange of the opposite wheel to just strike the point of the V. Not all cast iron wheels, but we have found some. If I can just answer the question about raised check rails, the ones I've got are just over 1 millimetre, as far as I can measure. But they did make a huge difference. I had a V2, which the pony always went the wrong way on the, it's about a 1 in 8 crossing. It's a very shallow one. Sorry, I meant an 8-foot radius crossover built with a C&L paper template, and not for the actual angle. But the pony truck always used to go the wrong side of the V, but with raised check rails, and I should explain that, it's because the gaps on the two rails opposite each other, the raised check rail solved the problem.
That was a
Yeah,
crossover, not a
completely understand
diamond
that
crossing, was it, Steve?
Sorry?
Was that a crossover rather than a diamond?
A crossover single slip. It's the actual crossover that's the problem.
We've got a curved crossover on Love Lane, in fact, two, where the crossing angle's 1 in 12, and they work. Although my earlier remark about when something doesn't work, tear it up and start again does apply to that one. I think Bob and I built it 3 times, didn't we, Bob?
Yeah.
For
Yes. Yes. Yeah. After you fiddle around with them a little bit, there really is only one way, and that's to start again.
Right. I've had another question come in from John Walker. I tried 31.5 mil, but my Helgen 47 wouldn't go through it. The 33 is fine, and the 47 flange on it is much thicker than the later Helgen wheels. So again, it's down to your wheel profiles being different that is the problem.
It needs reprofiling. Yeah.
Coming back to Love Lane, can I ask a question? How long did it take you to build the layout?
Oh, forever. Well,
John.
it's quite hard to tell, really, Richard, because it sort of just growed. So it started life in Peter Hunt's Perfect Miniature Shop in Sudbury, where he was building, well, he had us building West Mersey for him. And then he came by Love Lane, which was just four boards, I think, at the time. So it's 16 feet long to 18 inches wide. That was it. So we set it up straight across the middle of the shop, and laughingly said to each other, "We'll do this as a quickie." So I think that's about 2013. Is that about right, Tim?
Yeah, I think it was about 7 or 8 years ago we started.
And we would just work on it on a Wednesday. And it made relatively slow progress, and there wasn't much room to work around it. And one of the great problems we had was every Wednesday we'd turn up, and Peter had added a bit to the baseboards. And we actually couldn't build railway on top of the baseboards as fast as he could make baseboards. So it grew to 21 feet long, which is the current main scenic section between the two bridges. We then built, when we were asked to take it to the little guild show at Bury St Edmunds that Martin Long was putting on and still puts on, Little East Anglian one. We were asked to take it there, and we took it. So we thought we'd build traversers for the ends, and found we only had room for one traverser. And we ran it there, just, not really very seriously in terms of trying to put on a show, and decided that traversers were a real waste of time. And the only thing that would work would be an oval, at which point there was a major outbreak of baseball building. And one of our number, Susie, who was working at a local school, local to here school, because the layout now is at my house, I'm nowhere near Sudbury. We went down there one day, we had several sheets of birch ply, naturally, delivered, and within 2 hours, we built 2 very, very nice baseboards based on her I-beam principle. And after that, we built the rest like that. And it became an oval. It's got 8 sidings, 8 loops on the back, 8 tracks on the back to hold trains, which isn't anything like enough, because people like Jonathan build locos. You know, he says, "Oh, connoisseur 242, that'll be a weekend then." And
2 weekends, 2
so
weekends.
stuff appears. Yeah, so that was 7 years' work. We work at different paces. Jonathan works very quickly. Peter Insole, who is the art director, painted virtually all the buildings, not quite all of them. It works very, very carefully, and but the results, I think, speak for themselves. I think the buildings and the overall colour is one of the things for me that makes the layout a bit special.
Probably worth mentioning he's a member of the Guild of Railway Artists, so he's up there.
Oh yeah, right. He's absolutely superb.
Yeah.
In fact, I was contemplating actually sharing one of his pictures, but if you go to the Guild of Railway Artists or Google Peter Insole, you'll find a fabulous picture of an evening newspaper train being loaded at Stratford, and it is genuinely photorealistic. It's superb. But yes, Robin spent most of the last 7 years sitting underneath the layout, wiring it up. And he only got that job because he's shorter than the rest of us. But otherwise, no. So Robin's done that. Rod took care of all the lighting and obviously the filming. Bob seems to produce numerous numbers of Great Eastern locos, as does Jonathan. And I basically make the coffee.
I think you probably had a few more skills in there, John. 3D printing and laser cutting and.
Oh yeah, we do a bit of laser cutting, and yeah, we've used quite a lot of CAD. So a lot of the buildings are laser cut. And I actually now have, you probably know of Intentio, Philip Healy Pierce's laser cutting business, and actually I've got his first laser cutter when he traded up, and that's incredibly handy. The only thing is you waste a lot more material, because instead of having to wait for it, you know, if you're going to send it off, you make sure you get the drawing right. If you can walk over to the laser cutter and run it, you go, oh, that's not right, I'll do another one. And I've got a big box of bits that are rejects. I'm making a station for someone else, and I reckon I've made it 3 times.
Are the buildings based on particular buildings then, John, or are they just?
The station building is based on Chigwell, which is now on the Central Line, before London Transport got their hands on it. That's really it, because there aren't many other buildings. Oh, the station master's house next to it is the station master's house at Chigwell, which of course is now privately owned and changes hands for about 1.2 million quid. And when we went to measure Chigwell, and the station manager there showed us round, we pointed out that the house next door to the station used to go with the job. His jaw dropped. Because it's really quite a nice house, and Susie actually did most of the work on that. The other building which Peter and I are quite pleased with is the Waybridge Hut, and if you look inside you'll find a Pooley's weighing machine, which is a 3D print. But that's based on a lamp hut at Longstanton. And if you look carefully, there are a few shots where it's in the video. It's built on a base. It's quite a modern building. I think it's built in the 50s. And it's built on the base, supposedly, of the original Waybridge Hut, which got blown down by a bomb blast during the war, which is why it looks like it's sort of on a cleaned up brick base. It was a bit of amusement for Peter and myself, really. But again, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Bob painted that and got the sort of common flattened bricks, didn't you, Bob?
I did, yeah.
Yeah,
I
we
think
pay a lot of attention.
Yeah, well, I think one of the reasons as well is it's taken rather longer than we anticipated at the beginning is as again John said earlier, we took over somebody else's layout, but so we didn't really have a great plan. So we've been building things consecutively rather than in parallel. So we waited till we got the track down before we started the buildings, and we waited, for this and that and the other. Whereas I think any plan we have for the future, we would work out a better idea of complete idea of what's needed, and then we could have a whole load of parallel building streams to speed the whole process up a lot.
Sounds very
Like most sensible people do.
Another question for you on the baseboards. How do you ensure when you're taking it to exhibition alignments, because it must be critical that they are level and aligned for running purposes? How do you ensure that?
I have a tactic for that one, Richard. I walk away and let the others do it.
You're in charge of the big hammer, John, aren't you, that we use to whack it?
One of the problems with the main scenic section is the bit that's on the MDF boards, and they were originally set up so that they were between legs and they were they were supported their own weight. And MDF very, very slightly sags over time. So there are a series of very shallow U's. And we found that the only way we could put them all together was to make them all one long shallow U. Otherwise you get a series of humps. It's very slight, but it's there. But otherwise it's alignment dowels and bolts.
Yeah.
It looks good as you look down it though. It looks real. It's not perfectly flat like railways aren't.
Yeah.
Like gradient.
Yeah.
Again, we used these little brass dowels, Richard, and we put them all in after all the boards have been built, and it's really is a pain trying to line them up board to board, drilling holes. That's one of the things that we would do right at the beginning, building the baseboards, is put all the alignment holes in the the end boards for the baseboards before we started connecting them together. Yeah.
Also, another thing we found on another layout near us is to try not to use a soft underlay on the track. It may not be quite such an issue for fine scale because of the deeper flange, but for scale 7, with a soft underlay, it's possible for the track to move just from side to side slightly because there is a bit of movement in there. So we try and refrain from using. A lot of people use like camping mats, like a thin neoprene mat, camping sheet, but under the track, which supposedly reduces the noise, but it can allow the track to move from side to side, so you lose your alignment. I think we came to the conclusion that what you could do is to use that matting in between the board ends, but then have a solid board end. So like an inch at each end of the board where the board joins are, and then you've got a solid fixing to put the track down onto, but you've still got that soft matting in between if you really wanted to do that, but you've still got a solid end on each board joint just to stop any alignment issues. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, we've still got 29 participants, but we've got no questions up at the moment.
Well, I think the other thing to talk about then is Love Lane Mark II.
Yes, please, John, do.
Oh.
And this is being recorded, of course, so we'll be able to play it back in 5 years' time and say this.
Is it?
Yeah, where is it? Oh, I think Tim can lead on that then.
I think what we've identified from Love Lane is, I think it's come out extremely well, and we've had a huge amount of fun with it. But the single track down on the downside of the layout certainly causes operating issues when you're running at exhibitions. It slows everything down a lot. It limits what you can do. Theoretically, you should only be running through. You should stop. Every train should stop every down train should stop in the station to take a a staff from the Singleman to give him right over the single track, which we don't do. We like to run mainline trains through. So it's not quite as realistic as it should be, but hey, it's only toy trains, who cares? But what we would like really is double track mainline. We also think that if we're going to have double track mainline, it should be flat bottomed, because that was introduced in the, well, I think in the very late 30s, but started to appear regularly in the 50s, and it would be a little bit different. So we've just had you know, we thought we've got Love Lane, it's worked really well. What can we do that's even better? Don't quote on that one, of course. So we'd like something that's, from an operational point of view, could be more interesting. And again, I think a lot of us, well, we know the faults with Love Lane, which can be frustrating. And Jonathan was talking about the bendy boards, and others have mentioned various issues. So we could work around those. And I don't know, we all feel, well, I think we all like building things as well. Once stuff's finished, oh, come on, let's start something new. We want to get on and be building rather than just sitting around. So I think we just want another, well, personally, another challenge would be good, where we can build upon what we've achieved and I'm sure improve upon it.
Can we make all the locos radio controlled battery? Because then we won't need any wiring.
Well, we've got an expert electronics man. I think everyone needs to hear the story course, Robin, about why you do the electronics. And if I've got it wrong, don't tell the truth for want of a good story. Robin, a group quite a few years ago, and we heard that he'd worked for BT. And we thought, BT, telephone engineer, knows all about electronics. He was set to work on the electronics. He was quite shy in those days, and it must have taken him 3 or 4 weeks before, or 3 or 4 months before he told us actually he wasn't a telephone engineer. He was in charge of the motor transport side of BT. Electronics at all. But he seems to have done a bloody good job on them.
It mostly works.
Excellent story.
Does that mean the overhead catenary is out the window then for the next layout?
Definitely.
I thought third rail, third and fourth rail.
Third and fourth rail, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, the time is moving on, gentlemen. It's 2 minutes or 3 minutes to 1.
Right.
Any final questions that the participants would like to ask before we close? It's been very informative, very interesting.
Well, thanks for all tuning in.
Dialed in to listen to us. That's really appreciated that people wanted to find out a bit about what we're up to.
It's been very informative, and I hope those that are still on board with us have enjoyed it. And I look
Can I ask one
forward to
question,
having a visit to you at some point, John.
Just one question, and that is how many people here actually watch the video? Hold your hand. Well, most of them are on the picture now.
Count on picture. So.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. Rob put a huge amount of time into it for sure.
I've watched it. It was very enjoyable, and thank you very much, Robin, for that. Well done. And thank you all, the presenters, for presenting and talking to us and leading us through it. For Andy to sit quietly in the background, who's been my co-host. I didn't fall asleep, so he's had little to do, but thank you, Andy. And enjoy the rest of the show, everybody. Hope you have a good day. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Goodbye. See you in the near future, hopefully.
Yes, Tim. Thank you. Bye for now.
See you later.
Bye.